Happy Monday to all of you, and welcome to this edition of From the Stretch, episode 19 on this January 20th, Martin Luther King Day, 2025. Hope you had a great weekend, and we're ready to go for more current events, including some events that have to deal with Martin Luther King. We'll look at those events later on in the program. Right now, we're going to turn you to some interesting events that took place all the way back to the first of an interesting event that happened in AD 1265, the first English Parliament, a turning point in governance. Yes, Simon de Montfort convened the first English Parliament, a significant step toward the development of representative government in England. And this historic event marked a shift from feudal monarchy toward a system that recognized the voices of a broader swath of society. And by examining the origins, significance, and enduring impact of this event, we gain valuable insights into the roots of modern democratic governance. And then we'll take you to the passing of King George V, another turning point in British history. Somehow, some way, we get to that point. This one went to January of 1936. Yes, pivotal moment in British history occurred on January 20th, 1936, with the passing of King George V. His death marked the end of an era and the beginning of a reign of King Edward VIII. The passing of this steadfast monarch not only signaled a significant shift in the British monarchy, but also resonated throughout the British Empire and the world at large. And finally, we'll look at 1981, the diplomacy or the end of the Iran hostage crisis. Yes, let's take a look at that real quick. As the chapter in international diplomacy concluded in 1981, as the Iran hostage crisis ended with the release of 52 American hostages after 444 days of captivity. This moment marked the culmination of a tense and harrowing period in U.S.-Iran relations, leaving an indelible mark on global politics and international law. So, without further ado, let's start and go back to 1236 with a look at the first English Parliament and the turning point in governance. Pull that up right now and get that little... No, we don't want that. We want this. There we go. Now we switch it out and we're ready to go for our look at the English Parliament, the turning point in governance. Simon de Montfort, the Earl of Leicester, rose to prominence during a period of intense political conflict in England. And King Henry III's autocratic rule had led to widespread dissatisfaction among barons and commoners alike. De Montfort, a leading baronial rebel, championed reforms that sought to limit royal authority and establish more inclusive governance. His victory at the Battle of Lewes in 1264 provided the leverage needed to convene what became the first English Parliament. The Parliament of 1265 was revolutionary for its inclusion of not only the barons and clergy, but also commoners, such as knights and burgesses. Those are town representatives. And by involving representatives from outside the nobility, de Montfort's parliament signaled a departure from the exclusive rule of monarchs and aristocrats. This assembly laid the groundwork for the future development of parliamentary systems, including the House of Commons in England. The Parliament of 1265 was a watershed moment in governance. By including representatives of the Commons, de Montfort demonstrated the feasibility of involving multiple societal factions in decision-making, Although his parliament's authority was limited and short lived, de Montfort himself was defeated and killed later that year at the Battle of Evesham. Its principles echoed through the centuries. The legacy of Simon de Montfort's parliament endures in modern democracies, the gradual evolution of the English parliament, culminating in the establishment of constitutional monarchy and parliamentary. And that democracy owes much to this early experiment. Today, parliaments and legislative bodies around the world, from Canada to India, trace their origins in part to this English model. The first English parliament, convened by Simon de Montfort, was a bold experiment that changed the trajectory of political history. By bringing together diverse representatives, it planted the seeds of a system that values the voices of all citizens. Though centuries have passed, the principles of representation and accountability, established in 1265, remain fundamental to how societies govern themselves today. Simon de Montfort's legacy is not just a chapter in England's history, but a foundational story in the global journey toward democracy. Reflecting on this event highlights the enduring struggle for equitable representation and the importance of innovative governance in shaping our modern world. And there you have it, 1265 AD, of course. Now we go to the next event on the list, the 1936, the passing of King George the Fifth, the turning point in British history. Let me go ahead and take that banner up next. Put it up there. Vavoom. Isn't that nice? King George V ascended to the throne in 1910 following the death of his father, King Edward VII. His reign spanned over 2 decades, encompassing some of the most turbulent times in modern history, including World War I and the social and political upheavals of the interwar period. Known for his deep sense of duty and commitment, George V successfully navigated the monarchy through these challenges, preserving its relevance during an era of rapid change. His leadership during World War I was particularly noticeable and notable. Amid widespread anti-German sentiment, he made the strategic decision to change the royal family's name from the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to the House of Windsor, reflecting a closer alignment with the British people. This act of solidarity, along with his consistent communication with his subjects, strengthened the monarchy's bond with the nation and enhanced its public image. The death of King George V marked the conclusion of a significant chapter in British history. His passing was met with widespread mourning, reflecting the affection and respect he had garnered over his years of service. The king's steady presence had provided a sense of continuity and stability during uncertain times, making his death a profound moment of transition for both the monarchy and the nation. The transition to reign of King Edward VII was immediate but far from seamless. Edward's approach to his role was markedly different from that of his father. His controversial personal life and less conventional attitude toward royal duties would soon lead to a constitutional crisis, culminating in his abdication later that same year. The contrast between the steadfast George V and the tumultuous reign of Edward VII or Edward VIII highlighted the enduring importance of a monarch's ability to embody stability and continuity. King George V's legacy extends far beyond his reign. The foundations he laid for the modern British monarchy continue to influence its operations today, and his efforts to modernize the monarchy and bring it closer to the people have had a lasting impact, helping to maintain its relevance in the 20th and 21st centuries. Moreover, George V and his example of duty and leadership set a standard for future monarchs, including his granddaughter, Queen Elizabeth II. The values of service, dedication, and adaptability that define his reign have become hallmarks of the Windsor dynasty, and his decision to rebrand the monarchy as an institution rooted in British identity has ensured its resilience amid evolving societal expectations. Now we finally go to 1981 and a look at the turning point in diplomacy, the end of the Iran hostage crisis. Put that one up. Slighten that. Put our ticker on, which we forgot at the beginning of the show. We're still learning EV Mux, folks, but we're getting better. Well, the Iran hostage crisis began on November 4th, 1979, when Iranian militants seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. Now, this action followed the Iranian Revolution, which saw the overthrow of the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, and the rise of Ayatollah Khomeini as the supreme leader. The militants demanded that Shah's extradition to Iran to stand trial for alleged crimes against the Iranian people. The crisis quickly escalated into an international standoff, capturing the world's attention and sparking outrage in the United States. The 52 Americans, including diplomats and embassy staff, endured harsh conditions, constant fear, and isolation during their captivity. The crisis became a focal point of U.S. domestic and foreign policy, symbolizing the fraught relationship between the two nations. Repeated diplomatic efforts and a failed rescue mission in April of 1980 heightened tensions, further complicating the situation. The resolution of the crisis was achieved through complex negotiations mediated by Algeria, with both nations signing the Algiers Accords. Key to the agreement was the release of the hostages in exchange for unfreezing Iranian assets and assurances that the U.S. would not interfere in Iranian internal affairs. The hostages were freed just minutes after Ronald Reagan was inaugurated as the 40th President of the United States, a timing that underscored the political significance of the event. This resolution highlighted the importance of patient diplomacy, multilateral engagement, and the role of intermediaries in resolving protracted conflicts. And while the immediate crisis was resolved, the underlying tensions between the U.S. and Iran remained unresolved, setting the stage for future confrontations. While the Iranian hostage crisis had far-reaching consequences for both nations and the broader international community. In the U.S., it shaped public perception of Iran as a hostile state and highlighted vulnerabilities in American foreign policy. It also contributed to the defeat of President Jimmy Carter in the 1980 presidential election, as his administration was widely criticized for its handling of the crisis. For Iran, the crisis solidified the revolutionary government's anti-American stance and served as a rallying point for national unity during a tumultuous period. It also established the use of hostage-taking as a tool of political leverage, a tactic that would be echoed in later geopolitical conflicts. On a global scale, well, the crisis underscored the dangers of diplomatic impasse and the human cost of prolonged hostilities. It also influenced the development of international norms against the taking of hostages and reaffirmed the importance of protecting diplomatic missions under the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. And there you have it. A look at those three events that paved the way for many more things to come, as they say. So, on this Martin Luther King Day, what do we have to say about it? Well, first of all, it's one of those situations where today the new president is being inaugurated, and Donald J. Trump is our president as of this recording. He's doing a very good job. In fact, he's doing more than what the previous president did in the last 4 years, not to sound like a political barf bag. But at that point, you can honestly say, for once, we did the right thing on November 5th of last year. In conclusion of Martin Luther King Day, which falls on this date, January 20th, 2025, normally falls on the 17th of January, we take you to January 20th, the history, and we took you through all of those situations. Now we would like to go and say an MLK January 20th. And we're going to type that in. And we're going to Google it. And it falls on this day. And why does this Martin Luther King fall on, or what day? Okay, normally it's January 15th, but it could run any of those days, traditional wise. Just depends. But as you know, Martin Luther King Jr. Day is a federal holiday observed on the third Monday of January each year, so it could rotate depending on which third Monday it falls on. But Martin Luther King Jr. was the chief spokesperson for nonviolent activism in the civil rights movement, which protested racial discrimination in federal and state law and civil society. To mark the birthday of Martin Luther King Jr., the chief spokesperson for nonviolent activism in the civil rights movement, which protested racial discrimination in federal and state law. There is a significance. And it's observed now for the last 39 years. It's one day. It's a national holiday. And today, this year, it falls in 2025 on the 20th of January. Could be different next year, as it probably usually falls sometime within that third week. As long as we see the third week in January, you'll know that it's Martin Luther King Day. What the significance of it all, as you know, well, most of the time, it also happens to be the inauguration of Donald J. Trump. Two birds with one stone. Not bad to touch on very important historic meaning to this date. And this date will definitely go down in history, considering the facts that were presented to you today. We'll have more about Martin Luther King all of this week on From the Stretch. And, of course, a look at more events tomorrow on the 20th episode of From the Stretch for January 21st, 2025. I'm Jason DeCanio. Thank you once again for joining me. We'll see you tomorrow for more current events from the Stretch. Good night.